Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special meeting of the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners. Tonight we have only one item on our agenda, and that is consideration of Villanova University's application to develop a parcel of ground that they own under our comprehensive integrated college district zone, which exists, which we created by ordinance on March 31st, 2014. And we are now at the fourth hearing involving the university's application. And I believe, Mr. Solicitor, we have 3 more hearings after this scheduled?
Correct. Correct.
And I would just like to make an observation as we start that there is something called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law, as I understand it, states that the quantity or amount of work or production will expand to fill up the allowable amount of time authorized or given to the people doing the work. And so there's a danger here, I think, that if we keep adding meeting schedules, if we keep scheduling meetings beyond what's reasonable, what's appropriate, that we're just going to elongate this whole process, which I don't think is in the best interest of the people of Radnor, this Board of Commissioners, and petitioners and parties to the proceeding. So with that, I'm going to have our solicitor, and I should mention that we are operating under Article 23 of the Radnor Township General Legislation and Section 280-134, which is conditional use. So I'll invite our solicitor to get us going at this point.
Okay. All the commissioners are present. And I think where we left off last time was that, Mr. Cornelia, your next witness will be your traffic engineers. And I believe there's some testimony that'll be put on in terms of special event parking. So is there anything else that we had agreed to do last time? Basically, it's traffic tonight.
Yeah, basically traffic. If we proceed, we may get a little bit further with maybe another witness that Mr. Boll is aware of that we talked about also. But again, I guess it depends on how far we get tonight.
And tonight is just for direct examination on the traffic impact study, correct?
It may be that Mr. Cornelia will reach one of the architects who would testify as to the balance of the economic impact study that Mr. Wong testified to parts of, in which case I would be prepared to cross-examine. It's the 2 traffic studies that were just submitted that I haven't seen yet, that I can't cross on.
Okay. Before we get going, because I seem to have lost my list of parties, and I recognize everyone that's here, but I think there's a couple more people who stopped me before the hearing tonight that want to enter as party status. So, Mr. Yiannopoulos, if you want to come up, let's do that now and get your name and your address. Okay, Mr. Yiannopoulos, could you just state your full name for the record, your address, and where you live in proximity to the proposed project?
James Yiannopoulos, 15 Braxton Road.
Can you spell your name?
Sure. I think I can. Let's see. You want the first name too, or just last?
Just
Thanks. Yannopoulos.
And the address again, Mr. Yiannopoulos?
15 Braxton, Braxton Road.
Post office box, sir? Your post office?
No, there's no post office box.
Is that Wayne
zip
or
code?
Villanova?
19010. It's,
Radnor, Villanova, Wayne.
it's Bryn Mawr officially is what it comes out when.
Again, the zip code, please?
19010.
Thank you.
So we need that because now you get all the mail.
Oh,
that,
good.
Gets distributed.
I don't get enough mail. I'll look
Okay.
forward to it.
So where do you live in relation to the proposed project?
I'm less than 250 yards from Pike Field, a little less than 400 yards from the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster.
Okay. Is there any objection to Mr. Yiannopoulos?
I object. John, people are just coming up every meeting, and we're adding more and more people as parties. They don't have anything different in interest than the people already been entered as parties. It just is prolongating the whole process. And also, Mr. Yiannopoulos lives across the street from this development. He cannot see it from his house. He has no direct interest in the application, and for that reason, I would object to his being given party status.
Okay. Mr. Bola, you have any?
I have no objection.
Okay. Commissioner Higgins? you have-
Are you, there's an organization here that has been qualified as a party at the very first meeting that we held, the very first hearing. Are you a member of that organization?
Which one is that?
Friends of Radnor? Friends to Preserve Radnor.
I don't think I'm friends with them. I don't think I've officially joined it, though.
Well, never mind if you've officially joined it. Do you go to their meetings? Have you been to their meetings?
No, actually, I haven't.
What connection do you have with them?
I know some of them. I've met them here at the meetings. But I haven't been to any of their meetings.
So I would argue that Jim should be allowed to be party because he is literally a neighbor to the university. His backyard, well, your neighborhood is a backyard to the university. So
To paraphrase Sarah Palin, I can see Villanova from my house.
yeah, but you really can see Villanova from your house.
Yeah.
The university, because he lives behind the stadium. He can see Villanova Stadium from his house.
But
I'm
his
sure.
egress onto Lancaster Avenue is directly across from the proposed site
Right.
of the performance center.
Okay.
My position is I don't think if the commissioners have to be here for every meeting, I don't think people should come in and up every meeting they can come in and get standing. I think we have plenty of time for people to get standing. You were at meetings before. This is the first meeting you attended?
I was at the last meeting as well, but
Yeah.
I was told that you have to be here promptly at 6:30 and for
Or were you at a
work
meeting before that? You were at a
responsibilities.
meeting before that, right?
No, I wasn't. I was on vacation, and then before that, I was at work.
Well, I just think that we should not give standing to everybody that comes each meeting that wants to have standing and get up and speak.
Well, let's deal with, at least for tonight, Mr. Yiannopoulos. And as I said at the last meeting, the rules for standing are really proximity. That's pretty much it. If your property is close to a proposed project within a certain area, the courts have set some parameters, then you're entitled to standing. I mean, that, so if the board wants to make a decision tonight that tonight's the last night that anyone can come in and ask for standing, then that's something you can discuss separately. But in terms of Mr. Yiannopoulos tonight, I mean, there's no rules in the MPC regarding standing other than you have to be an agreed person, and an agreed person has been identified as somebody that lives close to a proposed project.
Well, John, I mean, we have 3 more meetings scheduled. Anyone can come in, I mean, have standing? I mean, can't we shut it off? Or-
Well, I think if you make that decision tonight, vote on that tonight, that, tonight's the last night to become a party in this hearing.
And on what basis can we do that? Because you told us last meeting we couldn't do that. That anybody can get standing.
I would argue we're not going to go there because the MPC is
Well, I'm talking
designed.
to solicitor. I'm not arguing with you. You're not a lawyer. I'm talking
Yeah,
to
Bill,
solicitor.
and the
Yeah,
point is, I'm an elected official that represents the
Excuse me,
electorate.
point of order.
But I'm talking.
I mean, they were talking, and I'd like to hear what they had to say. So let's allow them to finish.
Commissioner Rice has already stated that the
No, he was still
MPC.
talking when you interrupted, John. John, will you tell me?
In terms of efficiency, people sitting on their rights, I mean, this is something that's certainly been published for several months. If people want to be involved as a party, people can still come in under public comment at the end of all the testimony and have public comment. But I think in terms of people not being here promptly and participating promptly, you have a basis to cut it off tonight.
So my sense is, we did this earlier with, I believe, Sarah Pilling receive standing based on proximity, not at the first meeting. So I don't see how, and we also set rules in our first meeting, guidelines, not rules. I don't see how we could deny standing based upon the precedent that we've set and the guidelines that we established. Although I'm sensitive to Bill's point, and my sense is that if we have the authority to make a limit on applications for standing, that we should use that. But for this application, I don't see how we could deny standing.
John Nagel, do you have anything you want to add? I agree with what Don just said. Okay, Mr. Booker?
I think that whoever is within proximity, whenever they come and request standing, if they qualify that they should be provided standing, it's really not a burden for us to add another person.
Okay.
So,
Well, my view is that we should go ahead with Mr. Yiannopoulos as a party, but I would like to entertain a motion after he's admitted. The solicitor will make the decision. I would like to entertain a motion in the interest of getting this process moving and getting it at some point finished, that we foreclose any further admissions of people to become parties. So I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
I will make that motion that we,
We're fine, we're done with you. You guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I'll second the motion.
All right, is there any discussion?
Yeah, I think the problem I have with it, I understand the reason, but we could have set the rules in the beginning. We didn't. And, you know, there are a lot of residents that don't watch Board of Commissioners meetings. They don't get the newspaper. They may not even know this is happening right now. So if we're so in it that we can't imagine what that's like. But the point is, there are neighbors, I can assure you, if I knock door to door in that neighborhood, they may not know. So I think just in the point of public service, that we should just leave it open. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to walk in those doors next meeting and cause a big delay. I think we just let them speak their piece. Let them ask their questions, and we get good government that way. So, you know, you guys do what you want. I'm going to vote against it.
I mean, my only comment on this is anyone that wants to come in the last night of testimony or the last night will have an opportunity under public comment to say what they want to say. Becoming a party means you have the right to cross-examine witnesses. You have the right to call your own witnesses. You have the right to file briefs. It's an elevated standard that if somebody's serious about that, in my view, they should be here, or they should have been here by now. So, John, I understand that, but those folks can still come in and ask questions and have their say under public comment before the board finally votes on this. So, you know, people are going to have their say. It's just that you got to have some way to move forward with this. So that's just my comment on the motion.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right.
Comment on the motion or not? Do we have to have public comment on the motion or not?
Yes.
All right, we have public comments. Anybody want to say anything?
No.
No, this is public comment.
No.
Public comment on the motion.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
This is
first.
Mr. Schneller,
James
right.
Schneller. I didn't hear the full conversation. I'm just hoping, I wanted to emphasize that if you're going to set a limit, that you offer one more session so people who don't know have the next meeting to come to. And if I could, I don't think there's any reason to limit anyone because it's difficult for people to get here.
All right, any other member of the public would like to come up? All right, then I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, the motion passes 4-2 with Commissioners Fisher and Booker opposed.
Just, is there anyone else that's here tonight that wants to become a party? Because this is the last night that we're going to do this. After tonight. After tonight. That's the motion, yeah.
Tony,
Good
hi.
evening.
Tony Bailey, right?
Yes. I was here last Wednesday, and I was trying to obtain individual party status. There was some, at least confusion on my part as to actually what that was going to be. I don't think there was ever a decision. I did request this, and I'm requesting it now, that I have my own individual party status. And based on, there was nothing ever written for us. We don't know, how to, what to follow, rules and regulations. To me, it seems as if things are being done as we go along. And I personally feel this is very disingenuous to the residents. They have a big stake in this. I know you want to move things along. We would like to move things along. We've been part of this process now for almost 3 years, attending just about all the Planning Commission meetings, all the Board of Commissioner meetings, and but we would like to have our say.
So your request is you want
I
to
am
become an
requesting-
individual party?
Yes.
And what is your address?
Well, we decided this is the last meeting. Since you came and spoke as a member of the Friends, we decided last meeting
I
that you
didn't.
could speak, but you were a member of the Friends and you would speak on behalf of the Friends. Since you already participated as a member of the Friends, that you didn't get standing, but we let you speak, but from then on, you have to be a member of the Friends and speak on their behalf.
That was not my understanding or determination. All due respect, but that was not met out to me, that this was now, I was going to be Friends to Preserve Radnor, and I could not obtain individual party status.
Well, I was the one that said, go ahead, you can speak.
Yeah,
as a
you
member
said
of the
go
Friends.
ahead. Yes, you
can
did.
speak because the solicitor said that since you had spoken and you were a member of the Friends, I said, you can speak, we'll let an extra member of the Friends speak tonight. Since you can't get standing, you can go ahead and speak.
Let's have, I would suggest the board discuss whether or not you want to permit Ms. Bailey to come in as an individual. You were not going to speak as a member of Friends of Radnor, correct?
No.
Okay. So you're here in your individual capacity, just to clear that up. And you and I had a brief discussion before the meeting. And there really ought to be a spokesman each meeting from the Friends group. Last meeting, there were 2 spokesmen. I think you and someone else had some exhibits that were being presented. So your address, Ms. Bailey, is?
132 Barclayton Road, that's Bryn Mawr, PA, 19010.
Okay. And where do you live in proximity to the?
Within the legal limit, which is under 0.8 of a mile.
Okay. Mr. Cornelia, I assume you're going to object.
I am objecting. I have the same theory as I expressed last time, that there's no interest here that's different than the interest of the public as a whole. And in fact, she's even further from campus, and I don't think, than Mr. Yiannopoulos. So for those reasons, I will object again to
Okay.
standing.
No objection.
Okay.
I have a question then. John Rice, part of what I thought we were doing in the beginning was setting groups, and people would not be free to move in and out of groups. So the dilemma that I have is that, if Ms. Bailey had come and sought standing as an individual, I don't think there would have been an issue. But once one is part of a group, are they free to come and go from the group? Is the rest of the group able to seek standing as individuals?
I think what happened, and that was what we discussed, for that group, there should be 1 or 2 representatives here, 1 person to speak from that group. I don't think we ever discussed, members of the group coming in as individuals. I think there's some confusion. Ms. Bailey had some confusion. I think some of the other residents that I've spoke to were a little bit confused about that. But I think it's got to be clear that, if you're going to be an individual, you're an individual, you're not part of the group. And you're saying that you're not part of the group anymore.
I'm an individual party.
Okay. And
But
that's,
she did speak on behalf of the group. She did appear before us on behalf of the group, correct?
For a list.
Because there was confusion concerning that.
we have the list, I believe, of the Friends group, correct? Okay.
It's my recollection that that list only consists of 3 or 4 people, and they were emailed to you and me, I think.
Yeah, there was a small group of people.
So
From
what's
Ms.
been,
Long.
what's been entered into the record as the membership in that group does not contain Tony Bailey's name?
All right, let's not spend all night on it, just make her,
Wait, wait,
yeah,
wait,
let's go,
wait a
let's
minute,
go,
Bill.
let's
Wait a
get it
minute.
over with.
Tony,
We'll be here all
are
night.
you a member of the Friends to Preserve Radnor?
I am friends with Friends to Preserve Radnor. We're
Do you know what interest they have in this application? What legal interest they have? What is their objective? Do you know what it is?
No.
What is your objective? Is it the same? Well, you don't know what the
My
Friends-
objective really, and I've been coming forward here speaking about this concerning the parish and the parish parking for the parishioners up at the church, main church. And that's been pretty consistent. So I really represent the parish in the parking.
All right, let's
I'm gonna
not
object to that.
spend any more time on this, let's
I-
give her standing, let's
Ms.
go.
Bailey does not, I'm sure, I would ask her to show me permission she has that she's representing the parish on this. And
Well, the
Tony, you know that's not
parishioners.
right.
The parishioners.
Do you have letters
She asks
saying
as
that
an
you are a
individual.
parishioner?
She's
a
in,
parishioner.
she wants standing as an individual. That's what she said.
She lives in close proximity, and, that is the rule. I mean, that's one of the few rules regarding standing. So I hope the rest of the members of the Friends understand that. Some may or may not even live in close proximity, but you do, and
John.
unless the board has some objection, I would accept.
I want to ask one question before you. Mr. Cornelia mentioned that, in his judgment, the interest of Mrs. Bailey is no different than the interest of the public as a whole. Now, your test for standing does not take that into account. Do you disagree with Mr. Cornelia's claim on that point?
That's a general statement, that there's got to be. It's a general statement, but the courts have, it goes way back, but the courts have also said if you live in close proximity, then you have that special interest beyond what people that live on the other side of the township have. Because, the project's going to be right there, it's going to be in your backyard. And it's a pretty generous standard on the appellate cases. It's.
If there's no more comment, then you can go ahead with your decision.
So Ms. Bailey will be accepted as a party, and with that, I don't think we have anyone else here that has contacted me ahead of time. So, Mr. Cornelia, you want to begin with witnesses?
Thank you, board.
Wait, there was a motion that was, we voted.
Yeah, we can start, and then John will get that done by time. Yeah, we'll catch up. Yes, please.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your full name.
Barbara Chance,
And spell your last name.
C-H-A-N-C-E. Thank you.
And Barbara, what is your profession?
I'm a business owner, and our company does parking management, transportation, access management for municipalities, universities, medical centers, special event centers, and private businesses.
I've marked as A16 your curriculum vitae. They have it? Yeah. I believe you have a copy of it?
Yeah.
All right, fine. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I would like one, please. Thank you.
Barbara, what's your educational background?
I have a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD from University of Nebraska, the PhD is.
And what's your current employment?
I'm the president and CEO of Chance Management Advisors. We're located in downtown Philadelphia.
And what type of activity does Chance Management Advisors perform?
As I mentioned, we do parking, transportation, access management for all number of private and public institutions and groups.
And what's the length of time that Chance Management has been doing such a service?
And this year, we're celebrating our 30th year in business working with our clients.
And you mentioned your clientele. Can you just tell the board quickly, local, nationwide type of clients that you have?
We work nationwide and do some international work as well. In this particular area, we've worked a lot at Swarthmore, Cabrini, Lehigh, Lafayette. So we work for large and small universities and colleges, private and public, and we've had about 300 university clients in our 30 years.
Have you yourself published any publications?
Yes, I write regularly in the publications in the parking industry and in the Society for College and University Planning on parking management and other issues that affect campuses in terms of growth and change and how they manage their activities for traffic and parking.
And do you have any professorships?
I've taught at the University of Texas at Austin, where I was on the faculty of the Council for Advanced Transportation Studies, and I also have taught at Temple and University of Pennsylvania.
I would ask that Ms. Chance be qualified as an expert in parking management.
Just a very few. Ms. Chance, how are you? Have you designed special event parking and transportation plans for universities in the past?
Yes, we have. We've done it sometimes as part of master plans and sometimes just as a standalone project for just special events.
Can you mention a university or two that you've done this for?
We did a very large one for the University of Virginia for working with both the state, local, and campus police on their all of their event traffic. And we've also done parts of those in terms of master plans for Lafayette, Lehigh, and Ohio State, and University of Nebraska, and a number of campuses.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Just one more question, John, that I forgot to ask. Have you been certified as an expert in parking management previously?
Yes, I have, for various kinds of developments and aspects like this in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and for the District of Columbia.
You've testified, is that what?
Yes.
What you've just said?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, does the board have any questions on qualifications of this witness? Okay, seeing none, then she will be, Dr. Chance will be accepted as an expert in parking management. That's what she's being proposed for, Mr.?
That's correct.
Okay, but before you start, there is a Exhibit A17 here, which I don't think any of the board members have copies of. So what I would like to do is get some copies made of this while the testimony begins, if we could do that, and suggest to all the council to bring copies for all the board members. Because, Mr. Bowl, do you have it?
I need one too. I don't have one either.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to keep the official exhibit with the rest of the exhibits, but,
You need one.
you know, usually the judges read these things and the other party gets a copy. So just going forward, let's make sure we have copies for everybody sitting up here, Mr. Bola, and there really ought to be additional copies for the audience. They can be put on a chair there, and anybody that wants them can pick them up. If you want to send this to the township ahead of time, we'll copy them and have them available here. But these were just handed out tonight. So let's get the info out a little bit earlier if we can, please. So with that, Mr. Cornelia.
Did you perform a parking management plan and strategy for future conditions based on the conditional use proposal of Villanova University?
Yes, we did, and we had sort of four major goals of trying to have a new strategy. To distribute the parking demand so that it would also distribute the traffic and make things better in terms of congestion, especially along Lancaster Avenue. We also wanted to optimize the access and traffic to the new Pike garage so that everything worked smoothly in that garage, especially for special events, but also for the daily type of parking that will take place there. The third thing was to have a strategy for wayfinding and the different patterns that the traffic would do, because when you change things like this on a campus and people will be coming to different places, you really need better wayfinding to get them to the places they need to park. And the fourth thing was to have a public information strategy, to work with Villanova to have public information of a variety of types to let people know that things had changed and they would be needing to do different things. And then sort of a secondary goal was to work with the university in terms of the loading and unloading having to do with the residential units, to be sure that that did not interfere with the traffic and was suitable in terms of pedestrian movement and being able to have the loading and unloading work smoothly.
And you have prepared a report that's been marked as A17 that Mr. Rice was referring to.
Yes.
What type of events did you study?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, we can call it up, yeah. What type of events did you study in your parking management plan?
What we really looked at is what we would call an extra peak event, and that is a special event on the campus that has an extra set of demands associated with it for parking. And the extra peak event that we received data from the university was a basketball game at the pavilion, which was basically a sold-out basketball game. And it occurred during a weekday evening, the first week of the spring semester, and it was also an evening that evening classes were in session. So it was sort of the maximum amount of parking demand that would be occurring in the area of the pavilion and in the areas that we're talking about in terms of parking for the new development.
Did you also review the current existing parking supply on campus?
Yes, we did. The university gave us the existing parking supplies that was counted, and which is 5,130 spaces. And in the process of this, we were looking at how many spaces would be replaced as well as how many spaces would be displaced and where the parking was going to go.
And is there a table that indicates the displacement and replacement of those spots?
Yes, there is, but I mean, I couldn't understand for sure. Do you have copies of it now?
No, they don't.
You're going to get them.
But
Okay.
you
All
can
right.
put it on the screen.
It will be very difficult to see here, so I'll talk about it, but you'll have it to look at later.
Table 2.
Table
1, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Table 1 shows the existing parking supply on campus, and you'll have better eyesight than I do if you can read
We
that
can
from...
see it here
Okay,
on our
okay,
screen.
that's good. All right, you can see that Table 1 shows the parking throughout the campus. So this is not just parking that's related to the development, but it's throughout campus. West Campus in the facilities area, law area, or what's called Spring Mill. The main campus, athletics, Lancaster Avenue, the West Lancaster lots, and all the rest of South Campus. So you can see there it totals to 5,130. And
Now,
then
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you go to Table 2, just below that, if you can move it up, great, thank you. You can see there that there's parking that's going to be displaced and parking that will be replaced as a result of the developments. So the parking that is getting displaced and the net change you can see in the next to the right-hand column, where the main campus are going to add 133 spaces to the St. Augustine garage and 63 spaces to the Health Services Building garage. At the same time, as you go on down the lot, you'll be able to see that the, just move down for a little bit, the main lot, which is on Lancaster Avenue, which is 1,126 spaces, will be removed. You can see the parentheses around there, that's being displaced. And the visitor parking being added is 62. And you'll also see that the garage is being added, the Pike lot is removed, and the Pike garage is replaced with 1,293 spaces. If you go through all of these additions and subtractions related to the development and to the changes being made to the two garages on campus, you can see that it comes back to 5,130 spaces. So the university is basically moving the parking around, but it's keeping the same number of spaces to serve the special events and also this development.
Now, as part of your analysis, did you have to determine the future parking demand once the conditional use is fully built out?
Yes, we did. And if you go to page 4, the next page, you can see the student parking demand that's associated with the Lancaster Avenue housing. Go down just a little farther. Thank you. Okay. The student housing is going to have a bed count of 1,135 beds. Now, Villanova's typical occupancy of upper-class resident beds is about 97%. In other words, they don't have every single bed filled at all times. And so we took that 97%, which is their average, and you can see that that results in a projected number of student residents of 1,101 in the new development. We also looked at what the parking permit ratios are for juniors and seniors, because this is going to be junior and senior housing. And the juniors get permits at about the rate of 45%. In other words, 45% of the juniors who live on campus get a parking permit. And 55% of the seniors that live on campus get a parking permit. So we took the higher number, even though there's going to be juniors and seniors in this resident development, and said we'll estimate that 55% of these juniors and seniors that are going to be moving on campus in the new residence halls will be bringing cars to campus. So that left us with approximately 606 cars that will be coming with those 1,101 students that would be living in the new development.
And in determining future conditions for the extra peak event, did you consider all 5,000 some parking spaces or just certain parking lots?
No, we really looked at what parking would be reasonable for walking distance to the events, to the pavilion, and thinking about the stadium, and also thinking about move-in for resident students. So we didn't look at every last space that was on the campus. We looked at the major lots and garages that would be reasonable walking distance for a big special event.
So, for example, you didn't consider West Campus?
No,
Okay.
no, we didn't. We considered the spaces that people would reasonably want to walk to a special event from.
And what did your analysis reveal as to the future parking demand and parking availability for extra peak events?
Well, what we found is really that in terms of the number of spaces that the university has and where they're going to be after the development, and with the addition of spaces for the 2 garages, if we took the demand that was associated with that extra peak event, a sold-out basketball game, basically evening students that have to be on campus, and other types of campus activities that are just associated with what happens at night, the university would still have about 225, give or take, spaces available in those convenient areas. Convenience a relative term. Some people think walking a block is not convenient, but we're talking about a special event, and people are usually willing and able to walk to special events. But if we took the amount of parking and the demand that would be associated with a great big event, the university would still have about 225 spaces left that would be vacant, that could be used if the peak was higher than the one that we saw and observed.
And these 225 spaces, we're talking about the lots that are close to
Yes.
the activity.
Might be some spaces left in the SAC garage, or there might be a few spaces left in the HSB garage, or there might be some spaces left in the Spring Mill garage, because we would fill the Pike garage, which is right there by the special event, first.
Now, did you have suggestions also in your report for Villanova University as far as managing this parking?
Yes, there's a whole series of suggestions about how the garage is designed and how it will be filled and emptied. There are suggestions about the wayfinding and the messages that need to be in different places. We worked with the university in terms of routes in and out of the garages up on campus. So that, for instance, we're suggesting when there's a special event that the route going into the SAC garage becomes one way in to fill the garage and one way out to empty the garage. We also suggested that even though there will be gates on the Pike garage to prevent people from parking there that shouldn't be there, for special events the gates will be up so that people can move into the garage quickly and get into the spaces, and then when they leave it will be the same way. We also talked a lot with the university about a public information campaign so that the information about where the parking's going to be and what's changed and the routes and what's available will be able to be found on the website. There will be information that goes out similar to what happens now in terms of move-in dates. That information is mailed to parents and to students about how they will come to the campus and what they do. So there's a lot of different ways to get information, whether it's tweets on your phone, or it's written information, or it's website information, or it's ads in the local papers, to help people understand that things are going to be changed after the new development is there. There's a new garage and there's extra parking on campus.
Now, in particular, as to the students that you have there, was there a suggestion or recommendation as to where the resident students in the projected dormitories would park?
Yes. The resident students, the garage that's being proposed is 5 stories. Basically, the first story, because of the grade, is almost all underground. The resident students will be assigned to the top 2 floors, and they will be required to drive to the top 2 floors because we're recommending technology that will keep track of whether or not they've gone into what's called a nested area. They'll go through, during a typical day, they'll go through a gate to go into the garage, and then they'll go up to the 4th floor and go through another gate. And the technology will know and be able to tell the parking department whether they have gone into the appropriate place or not, or whether they've tried to get back down into the garage someplace else. So the process will be that the resident students stay on the top 2 floors, and the bottom 3 floors will be used for the visitors coming to special events. And during the days, they'll be used for visitors that are coming to campus. There may be some commuter students that are in there, and there may be other visitors that might be there for all day. But we're suggesting technology that does not allow all-day parking unless it's verified by the university, validated by the university, so that it does not become a SEPTA parking lot in case there is extra demand from that parking lot.
Have you spoken to the school about what happens once that Pike lot or Pike garage becomes full, and how they should manage their parking and what signalization they should use to let people know that that lot is full?
What we've recommended and what the university is interested in is having some electronic message signs at various positions so that as the Pike garage begins to fill up, people who are coming from the east on Lancaster Avenue will be told before they get to Spring Mill Road that they should turn left, that the garage is full, the Pike garage is full, and they should turn left on Spring Mill to go up to campus, to go into the PAC garage, and to go in the Spring Mill garage. And likewise, if people are coming from the west on Lancaster Avenue, they will be able to have a turn-in that goes into the garage, the right turn in, right turn out that's sort of at public safety, but also right turn in at Church Drive. But as the garage fills, they'll be instructed to turn right on Ithan and go up to the Health Services Building garage. Now, all of this is dependent upon the university understanding and knowing and having the technology to know when the Pike garage is beginning to be filled, because there'll be queues going to that garage, so you can't wait until the last person's in to make the change. So they'll be seeing what's happening, how that garage is filling, and then they'll also be able to see what spaces are left in the other 3 garages.
I have nothing further at this time. I don't know. Bill, do you want to ask some now, or do you want to?
Yeah, I would like to reserve cross-examination, members of the board, until Ms. Kaminsky and I have had a chance to review this report, and we can frame intelligent questions. I just did have 1 or 2 just basic ones to clarify.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that you identified parking spaces within reasonable walking distance. Did you assign a distance? Is there a distance that you have in mind?
No, we really didn't, because it's a little bit difficult in terms of walkways, and not everything is, a straight walking distance. We could probably add a reasonable minute walking radius to all of those, but in fact it's probably better and we think more efficient to move people into the garages where there are spaces available than to have them moving around on campus and trying to get in smaller surface lots that may be here or there. And with the combination of the Pike garage and Spring Mill garage, HSB and SAC, and the West Lancaster lots on occasion as well, there's adequate supply to get everybody into those spaces. And we think that's more desirable and easier for people coming to events than to have them go into surface lots that might be, 20 feet closer.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned you discussed suggestions from the university. Have you spoken to the Radnor Township Police Department yet?
We have been in meetings with the Radnor Township Police Department, and my staff has been at several meetings with them, and also we've discussed what they have discussed in terms of other special event activities with public safety at Villanova as well.
Is your report, A17, is that the final product, or is that a work in progress, Dr. Chance?
I think we're pretty much finalized with it now. We do have a couple of corrections that may have come out in the last version, but nothing of significance in terms of the basic recommendations.
All right, but certainly you would agree to discuss with the Radnor Police and/or the Township's traffic engineer questions or concerns that they may have about this report. Is that correct?
Certainly, we'd be happy to speak about any of it and to explain why we made the recommendations that we did.
Thank you. That's it, John.
Let's take a minute to get the documents distributed.
Do any of the other parties have any questions for this witness at this time? If you do, come on up to the mic if you have questions for the witness.
Sarah Pilling, Garrett Avenue. I distinctly remember at the very beginning, Villanova talked about the residents of the new dormitories warehousing their cars. Now I hear that the residents will have to park, when they come in on the campus, they'll have to park on the top 2 levels. There's a bit of a disconnect there because
Is there a question?
Ms. Pilling?
Yes, the question is, how did we get from warehousing to coming in?
Is that correct?
I certainly didn't use the term warehousing, but the resident students are going to be required to park in those 2 floors, and that's where their vehicles will stay. So I guess you could describe that as warehousing if you wanted to, that's where they're going to park.
Okay, my question doesn't fully cover that.
So what, you have another question? Of the witness? Not of the board, of the witness?
No.
Okay.
Of the witness, I cannot ask the
Okay.
question I want to ask.
Okay. Anyone else, any other parties have questions for this witness?
Mr. Rice, this witness is going to be back.
Yeah. I think Mr. Bowl is going to have more questions, so the witness will be back. If you want to wait till then, we'll wait till then. Does the board have any questions of this witness? Based on what you...
I have one question, just I need clarity. Maybe it's in the report. You mentioned an extra peak event. Was there a number of parking spaces assumed in that are needed by the event attendees?
Yes.
What is that number?
Based on the current numbers.
2,477, I believe, if I'm looking at the correct part of the table.
And what page is that on?
That is on page 5, the parking available during a weekday evening extra peak special event.
Thank you.
Commissioner Higgins, you have questions?
Why wouldn't there be a greater... Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No. All right.
Go ahead.
Why wouldn't there be a greater strain or influx of vehicles? A basketball game in the afternoon on a Saturday at the same time as a major fair or student event like Special Olympics or other activity. Why did you choose a weekday evening? It doesn't seem to me to be when we would see that many cars, vehicles.
Well, the university doesn't typically hold peak events during the day when the faculty and staff are there, and then there's also the peak event. So working with them, they felt that this was the maximum they would see, except, for example, Parents' Weekend, which is, you know, a very unusual event, and sometimes homecoming is as well, and they do special things, parking on the grass and other kinds of things to accommodate that. So this was felt to be the largest event.
Okay. And I think what your conclusion is that with the 5,130 spaces on campus, the maximum demand for any event or events would still leave a surplus of 225 spaces.
Yes, but I would say, again, that something like Parents' Weekend, like on most campuses, those really super events, which are usually 1 or 2 a year, are handled different than, say, a typical large basketball game or maybe a large football game.
What do you mean, handled different?
In other words, when you have something like a Parents' Weekend, when there are really many, many people coming to campus, that's when the university does things such as making grassy lots available to park on a temporary basis, and sometimes there might be parking along streets there wouldn't be otherwise, because it's a little like the church pews on Easter Sunday. You know, you
Okay.
do special things then, you don't necessarily build for that.
I'm sure your report tells us the answer to this, but when you use the term Pike lot, Pike garage, is that the new garage?
That's the new garage, yeah, that's the name of the new garage.
And the St. Augustine, the SAC, is that? what
St.
is-
Augustine Center, where there's a 2-story garage there already, and some spaces are being added to that. Yeah,
That's near Connolly, okay. And then HSB,
that's on north on Ithan, and it's the smaller garage that is, there we go, thank you. Can you see that one up at the top there?
yeah, is
On
that
Ithan
near
Avenue.
the
Show the
pavi-
pavilion.
Pavilion?
Right.
John, show the pavilion.
And then the Spring Mill lot. I should know these because I
Yeah,
live
that's
here.
right.
But
Spring Mill Garage is the one in the law area. It's sometimes called the Law Garage, but its real name is
Okay.
the Spring Mill Garage.
And lastly, when you were describing the traffic moving from the west on Lancaster and the east on Lancaster, and you said that the university would have a system of alerting motorists ahead of time when the Pike lot was filled or when any of these lots were filled, how are they going to be alerted? By people, your parking people out there, or our police, or what?
It's a little early to say, although we're suggesting to the university that they use technology to the extent possible. Parking technology and even the technology that's used to say how many spaces are still left in a facility is moving very quickly in our industry. So we're suggesting possibilities which could be in place, but we're suggesting that the university, it's probably 2 or 3 years from now when the garage will open, that they pick the technology that's the most appropriate then. So people might be able to get, a passenger in a car might be able to get a
Okay.
text message on their phone. We think for sure electronic signs, which are called variable message signs, so you can change the message from a computer when someone needs to change the message on the sign, and that could say how many spaces were available or that it was time to turn and go to the HSB
Okay.
garage or to the Spring Mill garage.
I follow you. Thank you.
I had one, I didn't think we were going to ask any questions, but, so the peak event that was chosen for the analysis was the basketball event in the evening when there are evening students,
Right.
grad students driving,
Right.
part-time students driving to campus.
Yes.
Is there any data, did you look at any data, was any data looked at concerning a football game?
We did not have data for football, although we did discuss with the university sort of what some of the typical attendance was at football and the fact that, you know, Parents' Weekend and Homecoming were really, particularly Parents' Weekend, were really extraordinary events where different things had to be done.
So, I don't know the occupancy of the basketball stadium versus the football stadium, but I believe the football stadium is over 11,000?
Yes, but my understanding is that it's not filled as often or as regularly as the basketball pavilion is in terms of actual attendance.
Okay, well, often versus, I mean, there are a number of football games per year, so it's at least 6, maybe 8 home games. Does anybody know that number?
Probably 5 or 6.
Yeah, so how can we just ignore that? If that's the largest stadium on campus in terms of seating capacity, how can we ignore that? So how come,
It's a Saturday.
you know,
One thing is the
it
football
seems odd
game.
to me, the events that I get complaints on as a commissioner are the football games, not the basketball games.
I think we felt that the loading of the campus is different on a weekday evening than on a Saturday for a football game. That's one thing. So there are more spaces available on a Saturday. Faculty and staff are not present at the end of the day on a Saturday for students coming in, and students are not coming in to classes on Saturday. So, you know, the timing of the football is really different than the timing of basketball, which is overlapping with other things happening on the campus on a weekday evening. So that tends to be, on most campuses, a larger accumulation of parking demand than anything that happens on a weekend.
Any other commissioner questions?
Just so I understand from council, your witness is covering traffic management, but are we going to have?
Parking management.
Parking
And Frank
management.
Tavani
Sorry.
is going next to
Okay,
traffic.
traffic, thank you.
Ms. Chance, just the signage that you said, there's technology available now to count the number of spaces in a garage. I think the Philadelphia Airport tells you
Yeah.
how many spaces are left on what floor. So something like that, but there'd have to be something out on the street also.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So an electronic message board, so folks that are coming down Lancaster Avenue know this is full, or maybe there's 10 spaces in
That's correct.
one of the other garages. So that's what you're talking, but that's available now, correct?
Yes, that kind of signs are available, but there may be some better things in 2 years
2
than
years.
those, different sizes, different ability to project the message. So as I mentioned, we gave several types of suggestions of what we would like to see the university consider, but saying to them, you know, you need to wait and see what the technology's done by the time the garage opens.
So this is one of the recommendations that you have on page 9, developing and locating appropriate vehicular wayfinding messages.
Yes.
What's it like now out there in terms of the wayfinding messages on the existing campus? Do they exist? Is there?
There are some, and there are obviously both Radnor Township Police and Public Safety, you know, directing traffic. But I think what we're trying to do in dispersing the traffic is to give people advance notice of where they need to go, rather than them getting to somewhere where they can't find a parking space and then having to turn around and go somewhere else. There's probably too much of that going on now.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I just want to clarify something. Referring to Table 4, existing demand, is that existing demand for the whole demand for that peak event evening?
Yes.
Or just for the people attending the basketball game?
It was for that peak event evening.
Okay. That's all. And actually, also, I think during your direct examination, you may have said west on Lancaster when you meant eastbound.
Yeah, I didn't have the
Yeah.
map in front of me.
Yeah, I
so,
think
yeah.
twice he said
Oh,
west-east versus east-west.
Sorry,
Okay.
thank you. But obviously, what we're trying to do is give people advance notice coming from both east and west as to where they need to go and if something is filled, when they need to turn.
Thank you. Mr. Cornelia, Mr. Tavani, up next, and obviously, we don't have multiple copies of the study. I guess we're going to hear about this, and we will also defer cross-examination on this until to the next night. Both Ms. Chance and Mr. Tavani will be back at the next scheduled
Correct.
hearing? Okay.
Hit your button. Is it
Okay.
possible to have some cross-examination from some of the other parties this evening instead of delaying that as well?
We're just getting the exhibits tonight, and I know there's no advanced discovery in zoning cases, but this is a lot to absorb. I think that you've heard some questions from the commissioners tonight, so you know, I don't know how we do that if, especially on this particular witness. Do you intend to finish him tonight, Mr. Cornelia?
I hope on the direct.
On the direct?
I know there's going to be a lot of cross, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
would-
not going to happen tonight.
Yeah.
You know, we'll open it up for cross-examination for any of the parties tonight, but he's still coming back at the next
Right,
meeting.
he's coming back.
So let's proceed on and have Mr. Tavani sworn.
I do. Frank Tavani, Tavani.
And Frank, what is your profession?
I'm a traffic engineer.
And I've pre-marked as A12. I believe the board should have that. That was handed up in the beginning of this process. Your curriculum vitae, is that an accurate
Yes, it is.
presentation? And can you tell the board a little bit about your educational background?
I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Graduated in 1993. For the last 21 years, I've been in practice in southeastern Pennsylvania as a traffic engineer. I've been admitted as a professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in 1999, a status I still hold today. I have PE licenses in other states as well. I'm also a certified Professional Transportations Operation Engineer, or PTOE, and I have worked with Villanova for the last decade, since October 2004, in many of its traffic-related due diligence.
And have you been sworn as an expert and accepted as an expert in various municipalities throughout the Commonwealth in the area of traffic?
I have.
And could you tell us just where quickly?
Well, here for one, Lower Marion Township, Cowan Township in Chester County, where I happen to be the township traffic engineer, Cheltenham Township, where I perform on an as-needed basis as the reviewing township traffic engineer, East Whiteland, West Whiteland Townships, also in Chester County. There's been quite a few.
Okay. Ask that Mr. Tavani be qualified as an expert in traffic engineering and planning.
Okay, any questions? Or
I've reviewed Mr. Tavani's resume, and I have no questions for him nor objection to his qualifying to testify as an expert in this field.
Okay, I have Mr. Tavani's resume. Does the board have any questions? I mean, he's certainly qualified as a traffic engineer.
Thank
Okay,
you.
no questions? Let's proceed on. He'll be qualified as an expert as a traffic engineer.
Thank you. Frank, did you perform a study on the impact of proposed uses contemplated in this conditional use application on the regional transportation systems and the ability of the adjacent streets and intersections to efficiently and safely handle any potential traffic generated by the proposed development?
I did. I performed two, in fact.
And the first one you performed was, what was the title of the first one you performed?
The first one was admitted as an exhibit labeled A1E, as I recall. It was a transportation impact assessment dated May 2014. Much more recently, and I believe to be labeled, if not already labeled, Exhibit A18 is a transportation impact study dated just yesterday and submitted today.
And that transportation impact study labeled as A18, that was done at the request of township staff by their review letters.
And also to address comments received from PennDOT dated in a letter dated 1 August 2014.
Okay, and what did the study include?
It included quite a bit. Any traffic study begins with data collection. It's always the first step, or traffic counts. We discussed which intersections should be analyzed with the township back at the end of spring 2012, and over the course of that summer received a list of 17 intersections that we were asked to analyze. Those intersections were counted and analyzed in the fall of 2012, and even additional subsequent data efforts took place after that point. We collected data during routine or ordinary conditions, AM and PM peak periods, typical weekday counts. We also conducted counts during a basketball event and also during homecoming, both in 2012. We also reviewed some campus-wide parking data that was supplied by Villanova's Public Safety. We performed parking evaluations and traffic counts at West Campus, since the demographic there is similar to what's proposed by the applicant in this project. We performed accident investigations, and of course, we performed level of service analysis.
Did your study also include a transportation capital improvement plan?
It did.
And we'll discuss that later on?
Yes.
Okay. Did the analysis include all modes of transportation, and was it based on the current Pennsylvania Department of Transportation requirements of their strike-off letter that is cited in the CICD?
Yes, it did.
And did the study that you performed comply with the requirements of CICD ordinance?
Yes, it did.
And could you tell us, we've marked as A17, can you tell us the study and the effects of the development on traffic on the adjacent streets and intersections?
Sure. I think it was A18.
A18, excuse me.
The effect is generally small. There are new parking locations proposed throughout campus, as you heard from the previous witness. That has the effect of redistributing the traffic associated with that parking, and as a result, tends to lessen the effect of the campus at these various locations, since instead of, for example, having a more focal effect at main lot as exists today, there's parking added to the SAC garage, parking added to the HSB garage, a large surface lot constructed called the West Lancaster lot, and this has the effect of distributing traffic in a more equitable fashion, which results in traffic that's more easily managed with lower delays. And I should point out that that conclusion was determined even assuming very conservative measures with regard to trip generation.
And what was your conclusions on trip generation?
Well, as I believe we may have heard in earlier hearings, the project is really aimed at addressing unmet student housing demand of the undergraduate juniors and seniors who are currently commuting to campus today. If this application is approved and this project is built, those currently commuting students will now be campus residing students. And as a result, they won't be driving as they do today during peak hours. This logic is clear and easily understood. Despite that, what the traffic study was based upon was that all of the parking spaces that are currently used today and will be redistributed in the future will continue to have trip generation characteristics identical to what exists on the campus today. So all that parking is still assumed to be peak hour moving traffic instead of taking an appropriate and logical discount for some parking no longer moving during peak hours. And in addition to that, most recently, in the Township Traffic Engineer's letter, there was a request to examine, not necessarily include, but examine the trip-making potential of the subordinate retail uses that may be part of the project. And an abundance of caution, A18 now includes not only a discussion of that potential, but actually includes that traffic as part of the future build analysis.
And what do those numbers indicate?
Well, again, the first component is essentially a redistribution of traffic. There may be some small increase in parking campus-wide, and that could result in some small increase in parking associated with that increase, since all spaces are assumed to be peak hour moving traffic. The 15,000 square feet plus or minus of subordinate retail uses will generate, for the most part, internal or captured traffic. The real intent of those retail uses is to address the needs of Villanova faculty, staff, students, employees, and visitors. And as you might imagine, that traffic will be foot traffic. It won't be external new vehicular trips.
Is that what you mean by captured traffic that's already there?
Exactly. However, the question became how much external traffic, if any, could those uses generate? And after some reflection and discussion with the Township Traffic Engineer, we agreed that perhaps another existing campus in the area could be an indicator of what that traffic could be. As it turns out, at St. Joe's University, near the intersection of 54th Street and City Avenue, approximately 8 years ago, they constructed a garage which has a first-floor retail component having 3 uses: a restaurant, a bookstore, which despite its name includes a large clothing component as well as a small convenience store-like component, and also a coffee shop. The footprint of that building is about 20,000 square feet, and after allowing for things like ramps to the garage and some cutouts for dumpsters and common hallways, there's probably about 15 or 16,000 square feet of those retail uses. Knowing that the exact makeup of the applicant's retail uses is not defined at this time, the total sum of that traffic is probably a good indicator of what could happen if this project moves forward. So over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, I and others on my staff visited that campus and counted traffic activity, really people going in and out of those uses. Also had discussions with the managers of the stores and ultimately determined that the external traffic is on the order of about 22 trips in the morning and about 64 in the afternoon. So that traffic was added into this study in addition to assuming all the parking spaces continue to be active.
Okay, now, did your study include proposed traffic improvements?
It did.
And could you take the board through what those traffic improvements you're recommending are?
The easiest way to do this is probably to pull up A1E, the old one, since I'm more familiar with those pages.
We're referring to A1A, but these are the same recommendations made in A18?
Yes, and I should offer that even though it's unfair to ask the board to ask questions of A18, when the board does have an opportunity to review it, they will find that the conclusions are largely unchanged. A18 includes a lot of information and is fully compliant with PennDOT strike-off letter standards, but as I suspected, nothing really changes in terms of capital improvements, off-site improvements. So if the board, at its pleasure, does want to ask questions based on A1E, I can tell them in the sworn testimony that it will be substantially similar to what cross for A18 would be. But anyway, if you go to page 400 of A1E, the next one, sorry, page 402 of the PDF, page 400 as labeled in the document. Let's try 403. I'm getting rusty. There we are.
Frank, I'm shocked you don't know these pages.
I know. It's been a long road. No pun intended. So figure 1, as shown on the display, is labeled Site Plan Excerpt. It shows in grayscale the outline of the entire project, essentially, with the exception of HSB and SAC. But to the left, you can see the proposed West Lancaster lot, surface lot, which is really a consolidation of existing parking plus some added parking. And further east is the existing signalized intersection of Church Walk, where a pedestrian bridge is proposed. And then continuing further east, you have the intersection of Ithan Avenue, the garage, and points of access there. So there's 2 figures that describe the proposed improvements. So looking at this one, you can see in red a lot of what appear to be dashes or hyphens. Those are existing driveways, which as part of this project, thank you, John, will be closed. Each of those driveways are existing unsignalized, unregulated intersections. In other words, you can make all turning movements, whether it's a left in, a left out, et cetera. As a result, these driveways do potentially create some added friction for through traffic along Route 30, since there are turning movements at them. Each of those driveways goes to separate parking lots associated with various buildings. As depicted on page 403 of A1E, 8 of those driveways will be eliminated. They will in fact be consolidated into a new right in, right out only channelized intersection, which, as the name implies, only permits a right turn in and a right turn out. It's much less disruptive to traffic flow and will allow traffic to flow more freely in that area. Now, a question might be, how will people making left turns at those driveways today be accommodated? If you look at the bottom right of the screen, you'll see that the West Lancaster lot includes a connection to Church Walk, which is a signalized intersection and a more appropriate location for left turn movements. So since we're talking about Church Walk, maybe the next page would be more helpful.
Could I want to make sure I understand your...
Yes.
The 8 driveways today are on the south side of Lancaster Avenue?
Yes, thank you. I should have said that.
Okay. And you referred to something called the Lancaster, West Lancaster lot. That was not something Dr. Chance talked about. Where is the West Lancaster lot?
I'm sorry, as I was preparing for testimony, I did not capture all of the last witness's testimony. I know that anecdotally with the applicant, this lot had been described as the West Lancaster lot or the WLL lot. I really don't know how the last witness referenced it.
Yeah, this is a lot that's
Across from the church?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
A little bit west of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we can go to the next page of the, and if you could zoom out, please. Thank you. This is a much more detailed figure and includes 4 quadrants. We'll look at the upper left quadrant first. This just adds a little bit more detail to the right-in, right-out access I described moments ago. One thing I failed to mention is there's a proposed auxiliary turn lane at this location, namely a separate right turn decel lane. As shown, the plans currently reflect a proposed length of 125 feet. That's the full width section of the lane and a 75-foot taper. John, if you could go to below. Now here at Church Walk, where we left off with the last slide, again, there's an existing signalized intersection at this location. The proposal here is to add 2 auxiliary lanes, one being another eastbound right turn lane and a new westbound left turn lane. As shown in red, those lanes will have respective lengths of 125 and 100 feet, as well as taper lengths of 75 feet. As shown right in the center of this depiction, there's also the grade-separated pedestrian bridge, which is something that's been talked about extensively already, I believe. This will connect the what's sometimes referred to as the Route 100 line to the south with main campus to the north. It will effectively be an almost level transition. Some testimony from prior witnesses and some questions I heard seemed to potentially muddle the grade differential at hand here. Currently, if you walk up Church Walk, there are several steps, landings that are basically long, slightly sloped areas, and then additional steps. But there's a grade change. You know, it's effectively about 1 story. So what's proposed here is a rather elegant solution where this entire area is effectively going to be elevated to the height of the top of those steps and connect with the top of the Route 100 line. The reason why I'm pointing that out now, as it's convenient, is that the work that a pedestrian would do in terms of raising himself or herself up the z-axis is really no different here than under existing conditions. It's just more concentrated into a staircase as opposed to being protracted over a longer distance, as with Church Walk. In any event, I'm sure some questions will come up about that later. That's the extent of the traffic improvements at this intersection. Oh, and the northbound approach, which is currently 1 lane, 1 exit lane, is depicted as 2 lanes, and is specifically depicted as 1 exclusive left and a shared left-right, although that could be refined during land development as well. If we go to the upper right quadrant next, only 2 more of these. This is the intersection of Lancaster and Ithan, as depicted in the center of the screen. This intersection currently affords exclusive left turn lanes in both directions. They have somewhat short storage areas. In the westbound direction, effectively the storage is proposed to be doubled to a length of 200 feet with a 75-foot taper. In the eastbound direction, which is being highlighted now, there's a 250-foot full width section, which will effectively carry it all the way back to an existing driveway for Pike Lot, which is currently signed as an exit-only unsignalized driveway. One of the hallmarks of the project is to change that driveway from one-way operation, the exit-only operation, to two-way operation, and specifically to restrict outbound left turns. So that driveway will permit right turns in, left turns in, and right turns out. To accommodate the left turns in, a separate left turn lane is needed. Given the distance between this driveway and Ithan, what effectively will happen is the left turn lane will be lengthened the full distance between Ithan and the driveway, and then beyond another 100 feet to the east to accommodate the queue or the vehicles desiring to turn left. This is a significant benefit to traffic because anyone going into Pike Lot, for example, today, currently has to continue west, turn left onto Ithan to head south, and then turn left again from Ithan into the parking lot, since the driveway is exit only today. So this will benefit not only that motorist who has a shorter trip and can go directly into the garage, but actually reduces traffic on Ithan, since they're no longer going to Ithan to accommodate the inbound movement. If we could go to the final quadrant. So this is a enlargement of Ithan Avenue south of Lancaster Avenue. The principal point of access for both the garage and a small parking area south of the residence halls is depicted in the lower left corner of this quadrant. That intersection will be brought closer to the existing SEPTA overpass, will be aligned so that the driveways are opposite one another, and will each be two-way driveways. As I'm sure the board is aware, the existing driveways along Ithan today, there are 4 of them, are all one-way driveways. They're all either in or out. So this attempts to consolidate those driveways effectively into 2 driveways instead of 4, and align them opposite one another. In addition to that more favorable alignment, there's also the proposal to add, once again, auxiliary left turn lanes, a rather short one in the northbound direction, since that demand is assumed to be very low, only 50 feet long and a 50-foot taper. And in the southbound direction, what we'll have is really a back-to-back taper with the northbound left turn lane on Ithan at Route 30. And that left turn lane length will be considerably longer than today at 200 feet, and the remaining 100 or so feet will be a left turn stacking area southbound for the garage. There will also be a pedestrian crosswalk as depicted to allow the people going back and forth from the residence halls to the garage to cross without having to go up to Ithan first, for example.
Before we get off, we've heard Dr. Chance testify as to parking management for special events. And could you describe how you foresee loading the Pike garage during a special event? And I don't know which figure you would want to use for that.
I think that one was probably pretty good. One of the benefits of the proposal is that there are two two-way driveways serving the garage. The driveway along Route 30 as previously described, and the driveway I most recently described opposite the LAH driveway, or Lancaster Avenue Housing driveway. So currently, for example, some special event traffic that's going into Main Lot or Pike Lot that's originating from the west and heading eastbound goes up to Ithan Avenue and makes a right turn. And then in that location travels south along Ithan and makes a left into the garage. Some of that could continue today, but there are 2 alternative routes which are more attractive from a management perspective. One would be to bring the traffic in early. This again is traffic originating, say, from the Blue Route or other points west. That traffic could be instructed to make a right at the first driveway discussed, the proposed right-in, right-out access at the West Lancaster lot, stage in that area, and then continue straight across along the connector roadway to Ithan and directly into the garage. The benefit of this is it removes that traffic completely from the intersection of Lancaster and 30, or Lancaster and Ithan. So that's a second alternative for traffic to get into the garage during special events. Third alternative could be to use Church Walk in a similar fashion. Have traffic turn right in there and then make a left and continue as I described. And then a fourth alternative would be to use the PAC access, and that could, both traffic that's heading eastbound and westbound could use that driveway. Again, traffic that's coming from the east, from Ardmore, et cetera, that's heading west, once again avoids the intersection of Route 30 and Ithan completely and just pulls directly into the garage. If there's traffic coming from the west and heading east, that traffic need not turn right onto Ithan. It could continue straight through the intersection with Ithan and then come in at the PAC driveway.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to, some of the review letters have talked about a right turn lane heading eastbound at the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster. Do you have an opinion as a necessity for that, as an extra right turn
Excuse me a
lane?
second. Nick, would you repeat what direction is it that you're asking the question about?
Eastbound, going eastbound,
Eastbound turning left?
turning right.
It's the movement I was just discussing in part.
It would be eastbound on Lancaster. You're on Lancaster Avenue heading eastbound, and the possibility of a design right turn lane in addition to the two other lanes of traffic going eastbound.
I do have an opinion, and as you described, there are currently 2 lanes, one exclusive through and one shared through right turn lane. So your question is, what is the opinion about adding an exclusive?
And actually, there's a third lane that's a left turn lane.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So adding a right turn lane will obviously make that section of Route 30 wider. And in fact, one of the elements of the project as promulgated by PennDOT is to already make that section of Route 30 a little wider. The curb-to-curb length of that section of Route 30 is approximately 50 feet today. There's 5 10-foot wide lanes, and we have already been given direction to make those lanes wider to basically 11 and 12 feet for the through lanes, and the left turn lane will remain as 10. So the crosswalk is already, if given its current alignment, 6 feet approximately longer as a result of making the lanes themselves wider. If you add a right turn lane, you're adding a minimum of another 12 feet to that 6-foot addition, possibly more. And that, of course, means there will be longer pedestrian crossing times. Longer pedestrian crossing times at this particular intersection means less time for both Ithan and Route 30, since the pedestrian crossings here are accommodated in an all-red ped phase, an all-red ped scramble phase. So while there would be possibly some additional benefit, some slight reduction in delay, either from that individual movement's perspective or from the approach's perspective, if that lane is added, it seems to kind of get away from what we're attempting to do, which is not make that road any wider. And as I just described, that lane is almost becoming a bit superfluous in its role for management of special event traffic. The underlying existing traffic during both AM and PM peak hours during non-special event conditions is low for that movement, and the benefit is really marginal at best.
Okay, now also in the review letters, they talked about, and Villanova talked about, the four-way stop at the parking garage, the Pike parking garage, and the exit on the
Yes.
the former exit there at the Pike lot. Do you have an opinion as to the necessity or lack of necessity of a four-way stop?
I believe an all-way stop is necessary. I believe it's certainly helpful, and I believe it's necessary because there's a fairly significant pedestrian component that could occur at this location, and having stop signs would help regulate traffic and provide a greater opportunity for those crossings to occur. There's also a second component, the traffic going in and out of the garage in particular, but even the other driveway for that matter, would benefit from gaps that are created by having additional stop signs. And without those gaps, for example, the southbound left turning traffic entering the garage has to rely on courtesy gaps in the opposing free flow through movement to enter the garage. So if people are being rude, or if there is a particular influx of traffic during the very end of the green light on Ithan Avenue, and it goes yellow and red, and a queue begins to build up periodically, and might periodically extend to that location, people are less likely to stop in a driveway intersection if there's a stop sign. If there's no stop sign, people frequently, not so much out of being discourteous, but just not being aware, block driveways. And then that prohibits the inbound left turn movement I just described, and that could lead to a queuing condition that's undesirable. Sometimes you see like do not block driveway signs or do not block intersection signs, and they're not always adhered to. Having stop signs would make the motorist, I believe, less likely to block those driveways. The TIS marked A18 actually analyzed this intersection both ways, both as stop signs on the side street only and stop signs on all approaches. And during both peak hours, under either scenario, acceptable levels of service of either A, B, or C are produced.
Now, let's talk a little bit about parking. Was there a parking report done on supply and demand of parking on campus?
Yes.
And could we refer to that? And I guess you're referring to the TIS, or the TIA, although it is also in the TIS?
Correct. In the TIA, which is A1E, I believe it's page 398 of the PDF. Let's go to 397, actually. This information appears identically in A18, although in a significantly different location. This is information supplied to me by the Department of Public Safety at Villanova, and it's a comprehensive tally of available parking spaces on different days of the week and different times of the day, campus-wide. And there's the first Y-axis describes the locations. There's also a convenient campus map key in both exhibits to orient the reader. And what it shows at the bottom, the very last row, are the total number of empty parking spaces campus-wide on these days, which were just class days, as indicated in the lower right corner of the page. If you go to the next page, oh, and incidentally, there were always at least 700 empty spaces throughout campus on all those class days surveyed. The next page speaks a little bit to some special events, namely some basketball event conditions. And once again, a quick inspection reveals that there were at least 777 available parking spaces. You'll notice that the shape of this table is significantly different. This wasn't the entire campus. This was a truncated area. So assuming there were at least some empty parking spaces elsewhere, that number could be even greater. But again, this information was just supplied to me. There was also some parking analysis of West Campus. There was a question very early on, perhaps 2 years ago, about midday activity or how traffic turns over currently on campus where students who have cars currently reside. At West Campus, which is constituted of undergraduate juniors and seniors, we were able to do midday or non-peak hour traffic counts and also parking examination, parking turnover examination, and those are on a few pages following this. We don't have to go through them, but essentially what we found is there is less activity in the middle of the day, as we suspected, and it's on the order of about 1 peak hour trip for every 10 parking spaces, which is a pretty low trip generation rate.
Okay, the CICD ordinance talks about the effect of the CICD on mass transit. Do you have an opinion as to the effect on mass transit, considering the location of the CICD and and the surrounding vicinity as far as train stops and bus stops?
I do. I think this is about as transit-oriented development as you can get. Within a short walking distance, there are 2 SEPTA bus routes, the 105 and 106 on Route 30. There's also the Route 100 line, the Norristown high-speed line, which is part of the pedestrian bridge. And then just a little bit to the north is the regional rail service. So we definitely have that type of transit covered.
Could you have an opinion as to the ability of the adjacent streets and intersections to safely and efficiently handle traffic?
I do.
And what is that opinion?
That they can.
And why is that?
Based on all the level of service analyses conducted at 17 intersections, the conservative trip generation assumptions I previously stated with regard to how all of the parking is assumed to continue to be peak hour moving parking, and most recently the addition of some retail traffic.
Did you also look at pedestrian activity and pedestrian flow?
Yes, pedestrians were tallied or counted as part of the data collection efforts. There are separate figures in both exhibits which show what those volumes were. There were so many numbers I couldn't squeeze them into the normal traffic volume plots. And it's getting late, and I can't remember the exact page numbers, but they're in the table of contents.
Okay, and what do the pedestrian flow indicate, particularly in regards to the pedestrian bridge? I believe you testified to this previously at prior hearings, but if you could just briefly summarize that testimony.
There is pedestrian activity at two key locations. One is at Church Walk, and the other is at Ithan Avenue. There seems to be an evolving trend based on discussions with the Township Police Department favoring the Church Walk location. What you currently see on the screen, I'm not sure if this is an exhibit. Is this?
Yes, it is. I believe it's
from the conditional use plan.
It's from the conditional use plan.
Just for purposes of record, we're looking at part of the conditional use plan application. And you can see, if you look the bottom center of this figure where it says Aldwin Triangle, there's a dashed line that connects South Campus along Aldwin Lane and continues up to the Route 100 crossing that currently exists, and then goes back down to be at grade, and then continues off the campus and goes back up Church Walk. There's a significant pedestrian pattern that connects South Campus to Church Walk, as I just described. And there's also activity from the parking lot itself, as you might imagine, as it exists today, of people who are going to that side of campus who aren't going to inconvenience themselves and walk east and then north and then west. They'll just cross right at Church Walk. So the numbers there are significant. There is also some significant activity at Ithan Pike Lot, the east side of Main Lot, and even some South Campus students appear to walk straight up Ithan Avenue. But all those volumes are documented, and the idea with the pedestrian bridge, where it's shown at Church Walk, is to offer additional incentive for more crossing activity at that location, since the pedestrians will no longer have to wait for a gap in traffic or a red indication. They can just simply cross right when they want to right there.
Will the proposed development alter the designated function of any streets or roads in the immediate area?
No.
And finally, will it improve the interface between automobile traffic and pedestrian movement?
I believe so, especially given the grade separated pedestrian bridge and some other elements mentioned, like the proposed crosswalk at the proposed all-way stop-controlled intersection on Ithan.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Giovanni, at this time.
Again, Mr. Rice, in order to enable Ms. Kaminsky and I to review this, we'd like to reserve cross.
Okay, and I assume the neighbors want to reserve cross and read through this. Does the board have any questions based on what you just heard?
I can ask my questions.
Sure.
So, first question involves what you call the capture. Would there be also some capture of trips that would leave campus, meaning there's retail, students, faculty, staff would leave, otherwise in the absence of the retail would leave campus, generate trips, and then come back, generate trips? So would you expect that the retail would capture some of that and reduce the number of trips?
That's an interesting point. Now that you've put it that way, I do agree with that. No credit for that phenomenon was taken in either exhibit. But to paraphrase what you said, with these new subordinate retail uses, there is the potential for some currently external-based trips to now be captured on campus.
Very good. The pedestrian capability at the crosswalk, so the surface cross across Route 30 at Church Walk, that will be maintained and not degraded in any way. That's the way I heard what you said. Is that accurate?
I don't think so, but could you repeat the question for clarity?
So the existing surface grade for surface crossing for pedestrians in the vicinity of Church Walk, so it's not directly onto Church Walk, but where they cross from the parking lot to the other side of Route 30 to go up the steps to enter Church Walk. That access won't be degraded in any way as a result of the capability of the pedestrians to cross won't be degraded in any way.
This specific topic was not really covered in A1E, but as you'll see in A18, I am recommending that crosswalks connecting this. I am recommending painted crosswalks in Lancaster Avenue that connect the north side and south side be removed as part of this project. Now, any suggestion I offer as part of these proceedings obviously are still subject to land development, not to mention the review and approval of PennDOT, but since the purpose of the grade-separated pedestrian crossing is to convey pedestrians without having to go through the right-of-way of Lancaster Avenue, providing them seems, firstly, to run against the spirit of that proposal, and secondly, to potentially be superfluous. So,
Right now, I would argue that, that we need to preserve those crossings, and that, so, I mean, I would argue, so similarly then, the pedestrian crossing at Ithan, other than you said there's going to be an increased distance due to PennDOT requesting you to widen the lanes, but other than that, the pedestrians will still be able to cross at designated crosswalks at Ithan?
yes, and just again for purposes of record, I indicated that if the current alignment of the existing crosswalks is maintained, the angle, then widening the lanes as requested by PennDOT will increase the length of the crosswalks. There appears to be some possibility to make those lanes more perpendicular, those crosswalks more perpendicular, which could shorten that distance. So even with the wider travel lanes, there may be opportunities.
Yes.
But your question was more about maintaining the crosswalks, and the answer to that is yes.
Essentially, the CICD, there's an element of it that wants to protect the capability of pedestrians. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So you are protecting or maintaining the capability of pedestrians to cross at these two intersections at grade. That's the nature of my question.
And as I stated, at the second location at Ithan, we are maintaining that ability and maintaining all crosswalks, at least in function, although they may be shifted slightly.
Yes.
But at Church Walk, I believe the majority of pedestrian activity there is related to Villanova students, faculty, staff, employees, and visitors. And for reasons I previously stated, I think that they are no longer needed and could serve a purpose that doesn't...
Did you give consideration to the bus? Because there's a bus a bus drop-off in that area.
I did.
That would, the
It doesn't change...
occupants of the bus wouldn't be able to use the up and over grade crossing.
That's true. SEPTA routes 105 and 106 operate in both directions along Lancaster Avenue. There are currently signed bus stops in both directions near Church Walk and near Ithan Avenue. If a currently commuting bus rider was accustomed to exiting in either direction at Church Walk, under my recommendation, there could be the mild inconvenience of having to exit at Ithan instead. And then if they needed to cross Route 30, do so at that location to get to their ultimate destination. There don't appear to be that many more sources or sinks of pedestrian activity other than the campus in the immediate vicinity of Church Walk. So I did think about this for some time, but that is my recommendation. And as I pointed out, it's a recommendation. And PennDOT is the ultimate arbiter of what will happen there, and that recommendation may change.
Very good. Did you give consideration to, or did you give consideration to remote parking, essentially having parking in the law school lot and then some kind of shuttling to events?
The traffic study, the exhibits focus on ordinary Class Day operations. And that's because it was determined that that is when the combined sum of commuting traffic, Villanova traffic is at a maximum. Although there were special event volumes collected, and they were reviewed, in fact, by the Township, there was an ultimate agreement that there was really no need for additional level of service analyses for those conditions because the total traffic volumes were lower. Some movements were different. So as a result, I really didn't do any analysis in either exhibit that would even rise to the question of remote parking during special events, as you just pointed out.
Okay. I want to make sure I understand your response to the question regarding the eastbound traffic turning right at Ithan. So if you were to have a dedicated turning lane or an additional dedicated turning lane, then you would likely increase that distance across by at least 11, 12 feet.
At least 12.
And then you would have, if one wanted to preserve safe pedestrian crossing at grade, you would compromise that crossing by having 12 more feet of pedestrian, of distance necessary for pedestrians to cross.
I don't know if I would characterize it as a compromise of safety, but it would lengthen the amount of time necessary for the current PED scramble phase. That current phase is 26 seconds long. So for 26 seconds, vehicles cannot move through that intersection because all indications are on red ball and all the PED heads show walk, and then they go through different points of time to allow pedestrians to cross safely under very regimented PennDOT standards. Those standards are based on the length of the longest crosswalk of the street being crossed. So what would happen is if the cycle length is held constant and that lane is added, more time would be added to the scramble phase at the expense of other traffic.
So the safety would arguably be maintained, but then
Correct.
the inconvenience would then be on the other vehicles in different turning movements because they would have a longer delay associated with the added time to maintain the safety for the pedestrians.
That's a true statement.
Okay. And did you talk about the effect that the additional beds will have on trips generated?
I think that was the very beginning of my testimony where I pointed out that the currently commuting students, whether it's 1,135 or some small subset thereof or some small reduction, as the last witness testified, they're commuting today. And the very nature of the project itself, as I've said for 3 years, is really going to reduce peak hour traffic because those current commuting students will now be campus residing students.
And did you give us a number that quantifies that? I don't recall hearing it, that's why I'm asking.
You're asking how many trips would be?
Yes, did you quantify that with numbers?
I did not include that in the exhibits, but I could give you a round number if you'd like.
Please, yes.
The current trip generation rate per parking space under ordinary conditions is about 1 trip for every 4 parking spaces in the AM peak hour and about 1 trip for every 2.5 parking spaces in the PM peak hour. So just say 3 just to make the math easier. So if you have 1,000 students who are currently commuting, in the AM peak hour you could divide that by 4 and you would get 250 fewer trips along Route 30 based on existing trip generation characteristics of the parking in Main Lot and Pike Lot. That number would be even greater in the PM peak and would be between 300 and 400 trips potentially. And again, none of that credit was not taken anywhere in these exhibits, even though it clearly is going to be the case.
Very good, thank you.
Any other commissioner questions?
Just, I'm going to wait until after the cross. I just have one clarifying question. Mr. Tavana, you had stated that the PED scramble phase would need to be lengthened in time if we went to a right-hand turn lane eastbound on Lancaster onto Ithan. So we'd be adding an additional 12 feet to that to that pedestrian crossing. How much more time are we looking at?
That would translate to about 3 to 4 seconds. I conservatively assumed 3. So it would be a 29-second long phase. The cycle is currently 120 seconds. It occurs 30 times per hour. Traffic engineers do everything in terms of peak hours. So there would be that additional delay 30 times during the peak hour.
And what is that distance?
The distance?
What's the total distance with the widened lanes plus the 12-foot turning lane?
It's currently 50. It will probably be widened to 56 with the same lane configuration because of PennDOT's request for slightly wider lanes. And then you would simply add another 12, 13, or 14, as the case may be, to that 56. So at a minimum, it would be 68.
And with a 68-foot pedestrian crosswalk on a busy road like Lancaster Avenue, would PennDOT require any type of islands of safety for pedestrians?
No. I'm not aware of any standard that PennDOT promulgates requiring islands. They are sometimes provided, especially if they can be made part of a median or some channelization feature. And then you could argue a reduction in PED duration if the island was appropriately large enough to warehouse peds who may be caught mid-crossing. But I'm not aware of any PennDOT design manual requirement that says you must provide one at a certain length.
And just my last one, what is the total cycle length at that intersection?
120 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Still.
I just have one question as well. I know that the West Lancaster parking, I think the configuration has been changed, at least conceptually, at least based on Exhibit A14C. I think we talked about this at prior testimony. Is that reconfigured parking lot going to affect any of the ingress or egress as you've designed it?
No.
Yep, there it is.
The answer is no.
That's my only question.
Commissioner Nagel.
Mr. Tavani, do you think with the increased traffic, ped traffic that's now going to be ostensibly using this new pedestrian bridge and, the other changes to the parking and such, that there would be an opportunity to do away with the pedestrian scramble and go with a more traditional walking phase?
I like the way you phrased that question. I think there is an opportunity. I think what might be helpful, frankly, would be to have some post-development observations of that intersection to really see how traffic and pedestrian volumes mature. Again, ultimately, that's PennDOT's call. PennDOT has dominion over every traffic signal in the Commonwealth, even if they're on private property. And you can talk about the opportunity, but it's ultimately their decision.
Okay, Mr. Tavani, a couple questions. The right turn lane that Commissioner Fisher asked you about that would lengthen that, has PennDOT opined on that yet? Have they? I know there's an August 1st letter in the report from PennDOT, but
very good.
Did they address it in there?
They did. Is this been marked?
Is it in the?
It's in the TIS.
That's correct.
The new one.
Yeah, it's in the exhibit we haven't seen yet. You're the only one that has that.
Okay.
Oh, is that right?
And since no one has seen it yet, I can just read the comment.
Has that been marked yet? I thought we marked that.
A18.
She's looking. Is that what Amy's
It's
looking?
A18. Oh, you can answer the question. Yes, or?
It just says the study should consider an alternative that includes providing an eastbound right turn lane. The right turn lane is a recommended improvement, but not a requirement from the department.
Okay, so PennDOT's recommending it, they're not going to require it, and you have your opinion regarding it, right?
Correct.
Okay. You studied 17 intersections, right?
Plus the site access points.
Okay, and those intersections, some are all state roads, some of them are township roads, right?
Yes.
And again, I guess I'm the only one that has, there's only a couple of these, Amy has one, but as a result of the proposed project, are any of those intersections, my favorite topic, level of service degraded from A to B, B to C, C to D? Is there any adverse impacts as a result of this project on any of those 17 intersections?
As defined by the strike-off letter, none of the intersections are affected to the point of requiring mitigation. However, the applicant is offering substantial mitigation in terms of adding auxiliary lanes at Church Walk, as mentioned, extending existing auxiliary lanes, providing a grade-separated pedestrian bridge, which is by no means necessary to mitigate the impact of the project, at least not according to the PennDOT standards, which are referenced in the CI/CD ordinance. But the short answer to your question is no.
Well, I don't think you answered my question.
You asked if
Or
any...
have any of the levels of service, and there's an A through F, levels of service. PennDOT has basically, how long does it take somebody to get through an intersection in time, right?
The PennDOT standard,
Or any of these intersections, have any of them been degraded from a higher to a lower? From an A to a B to a C, C to a D, as a result of the project? I don't think you answered that question.
the study is based on the standards of the strike-off letter. The strike-off letter says overall intersection delay cannot increase by more than 10 seconds.
The strike-off letter is the August 1st letter? Is
No.
that what?
The CICD ordinance, I think the second to last page of the ordinance, where it makes reference to the transportation standards, says that a study shall be prepared, subject to the requirements of PennDOT strike-off letter 470-09-4.
Right. And I'm reading the last sentence in that paragraph, which says, "The applicant shall address any measures proposed to be implemented in order to mitigate any adverse impact." So I'm not an engineer. I occasionally pretend to be an engineer at public meetings, but, you know, an adverse impact to me would be going from one level of service to a lower level of service. So that's the simple question. You've done 17 intersections, and I know generally how you count, you project the impact, the additional trips, or any of those intersections, has the levels of service for them existing, or are they going down for any of those as a result of this project? And I don't know what the PennDOT strike-off letter is.
Well, I mean, it's an important standard, but for example, there is a location where the 2023 base condition goes from an A to a B. So that is defined as a degradation, but the seconds of delay added by the project do not violate the edicts of the strike-off letter referenced in the ordinance.
Okay, so your answer is yes, there is that one, right? From an A to a B?
Correct.
Okay. Any of the other 17, 16?
Just need a moment.
Okay. Recognizing that there's going to be some cross-examine on this, that's just one of the issues that,
There are no others. There are a few where things get better, but none where they get worse.
right, okay. Okay, that's all.
I have three. And we might as well stay in this area. I'd like to ask the indulgence of council to repeat one question, and it goes back a ways. It was right before you got onto the subject of pedestrians. And I think what you were getting at was the essential conclusion of the studies that Mr. Tavani has made. He answered that, and I'm not sure, I don't want to restate it because I'm not sure what, I was taking notes and I didn't quite pick it all up. Do you remember your question? And his answer, and from there you went into the pedestrian. It's probably in your report. It sounded like the cornerstone of your report.
I think the question, I believe, was whether he had an ability, do you have an opinion on the ability of adjacent streets and intersections to efficiently and safely handle traffic generated by the proposed development? I think that was my question, and
The answer was yes, I do have an opinion, and it does. The answer was yes, I do have an opinion, and it does.
Okay, thank you. The next question was, maybe this is for John. John, what is the gain with regard to the Ithan Avenue intersection and the dedicated right turn lane for eastbound traffic? You seem to be fixating on that.
We don't have any members of the traffic safety unit here tonight to cross or to examine. But from my
Point of order on this, though, John, is this isn't really appropriate
I'm not going to
for-
give an opinion, I'm just going to say.
But this isn't the mechanism to do that.
Then I'll ask.
It's board discussion. I mean, you can have
Yeah.
some discussion,
I
but
think I can answer this question. I'll just put it this way. Living in the area, passing that intersection during events, there are always police officers directing cars down Ithan Avenue. Okay, so they're making a right turn onto Ithan Avenue from Lancaster Avenue eastbound. So Mr. Tavani, I believe, testified earlier tonight that there didn't seem to be a lot of activity at that corner. So I'm not sure if that they're not your words, but Didn't you give an opinion as to traffic counts making a right turn from Lancaster Avenue onto Ithan Avenue?
I did, and specifically in A1E on page 402, which is an existing AM volume figure, there are 35 vehicles during the AM peak hour that make that movement.
Yeah, no, but you opined on a peak, now, you said it quickly, but I was certain you said something to the effect at an extra peak event. Again, I don't have the transfer, but you said something to the effect that during an extra peak event, there was not a lot of activity, returns activity at that intersection.
I don't think I used the term extra peak at all during my testimony, but I could clarify.
You did use those words at one moment. I don't know when it was.
Well, we're going to have transcripts, and
Okay, if he can clarify it, then let
we're
him.
going to have cross-examination.
Maybe clarify.
Are you asking about the right turn volumes?
Yes.
Are you asking about the right turn volumes during special events or during ordinary conditions?
Special events.
Okay. Hold for 1 minute. I was talking about the total intersection volume during special events was comparable to or less than total intersection traffic during ordinary conditions. But for certain movements, there may be higher volumes, especially how those events are currently handled today, which will obviously be very different in the future, as I outlined with the multiple paths involving the West Lancaster lot. So this number will undoubtedly go down if the project is approved. But currently, during homecoming, for example, that right turn was 166 vehicles, and that was in 1 hour from 12 noon to 1 p.m. During a basketball game in December 2012, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., it was 176
It's in 1 hour?
in 1 hour.
Now, just to elaborate further on that, I believe there was testimony here this evening about how there'll be other access points that currently are not there today onto that Ithan Avenue garage.
Correct, and those access points will have the effect of lowering those numbers I just stated.
I have one more question, and it gets back to the area Commissioner Curley was probing, and that is safe access or lack of degradation of the crossing at Church Walk. Today, the sources of pedestrian traffic across from the south parking lot to the church are students coming from South Campus, or people coming from South Campus. People coming from the parking lot, the big south parking lot where the project is going to go. People coming from the West Lancaster Avenue parking lot, and then pedestrians that alight from a bus or just are walking up and down Lancaster Avenue. Here's my question. If your recommendation is adopted by the university and approved by PennDOT, and that would be to remove the crosswalk striping at Church Walk, what assurance would we have that all those sources of traffic that I mentioned will not be able to cross at grade, that they will have to somehow go up and get onto the bridge going across Lancaster Avenue?
I believe the assurances would be provided through signage that restricts ped movements. There's a very typical standard sign that restricts ped crossings. The installation of fencing along the north side of Lancaster Avenue. People will learn that if they're going, most of the pedestrian sources you described were Villanova people. So if those people are going to the main campus and they learn, either by using their eyes or by past experience, that they can no longer cross at grade and get to where they're going, they will use the pedestrian bridge. There's really just the component of the SEPTA bus activity, which I did not document, but I would believe is small and could be easily accommodated at the Ithan Avenue stop. And one component you didn't mention, the admissions people that might be visiting and want to cross, of course, they could also just simply use the staircase located immediately east of the parking area and still go up and cross.
You said one way to stop the pedestrian traffic would be to erect a fence on the north side of Lancaster Avenue.
In addition to signage and, of
Yeah,
course,
in
the
addition.
elimination of the
And would
crosswalk.
that fence then block anybody let's take a pedestrian who's walking from the Villanova Shopping Center at 320,
Right.
walking east, and he or she wants to go into the church. What do they do?
I did not examine that. I would imagine there's two alternatives. One would be to somehow incorporate Spring Mill Road or Route 320. If they're coming from Villanova Center, which I think you described, they could just as easily cross 320.
So it's not a perfect solution, but what I think you're saying is there's no perfect solution anywhere where we have traffic,
Especially in
highways,
life.
and pedestrians. Okay.
Is there a walkway now, as soon as you pass the pizza places? Isn't there a walkway you can cut right through the campus? Will that be maintained?
I believe there is, in looking at page 400 from A1E. I don't know if it will be maintained, and my familiarity with that part of campus is admittedly limited and perhaps be answered by another witness. But I do see what you're talking about right there.
Yeah, and probably, if I may, dilemma here is that obviously the concern is getting the students across Lancaster Avenue and ensuring they take the bridge. And so one dilemma is, okay, we can ensure them to take the bridge by putting a fencing on the north side of Lancaster Avenue that forces them to take the bridge. But then the issue, as Don has mentioned, is if people want to come to the church or cross at the bus stop, and get to the church, then we have an issue. So that's kind of the dilemma that we're in here right now, is if we do include a crosswalk at Church Walk, then would that encourage the kids to use the crosswalk as opposed to use the pedestrian bridge?
That's what I want to avoid.
Yeah.
I want to avoid people being attracted to surface crossing.
Right, and the way to avoid that is to put up the fence along the north side, which is what we're probably going to propose by the end of our testimony, but again, that's going to be up to the board to decide if they want that.
I mean, this has morphed into discussion, so, but.
Yeah, I know.
To me, that's not the solution. To me, the solution is to make the pedestrian access more naturally amenable. Like you want a rational student to see the overhead crossing and not think about it and take that crossing. And if you do that, you're not precluding the surface crossing. You want to make the surface crossing irrational to a student, not unattainable to a student. And in my opinion, what we have to also look out for is the pedestrians who are not students, and we also have to look out for the errant pedestrian, the one that walks halfway down the block without realizing where they are, which sometimes happens in these situations. And they become stranded because the next safe crossing is 3/4 of a mile away. So I think we have to preserve the safety of those pedestrian crossings for pedestrians and just make the route that we want, or that we decide is best, the most logical route that a pedestrian would take.
And to that end, Don, I mean, we haven't really talked about the SEPTA stop there. So I could easily see someone being employed at the Villanova Center at one of those restaurants taking the Route 100. And the next stop, which is down by the physical fitness place, it's not the one you would want to take to get to Villanova Center.
Probably what you would do, you would cross at 320, and then you'd be on the south side where you would have access to the 100.
Yeah.
But the issue is, we're talking about thousands of students and talking about 5, 6, or 10 other people, so we have to weigh that as far as moving traffic.
Just maybe for the traffic engineer, do we have any ridership data from SEPTA on the bus routes?
I do not.
So we don't really know if those buses are being used to access the university at this time.
I have not reviewed SEPTA ridership data.
Okay. So I think that's a big hole in the argument here. We need to know that information.
And probably a lot of this may be an issue for land development also, as opposed to conditional use.
Okay. Anything else? Any other witnesses tonight?
Oh, we do have Mr. Kluver, which, since we have some time.
Okay.
I'm going to ask for 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's make it 10.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Do you need to, you think you need to testify from there, or do you want to?
I don't know that I really need to refer to it.
Okay. Yeah, all right, fine, okay.
All right, we're going to reconvene. I think the applicant has one more witness. I see a witness at the table, but I don't see the counsel. Here he comes now.
Because you mentioned something about economics, that's what.
Yeah, right.
Okay, Mr. Cornelia, do you want to proceed?
Yes.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about
I do. My name is John Kluver, C-L-U-V-E-R.
Okay, just, Mr. Keneally, before you start, just note for the record, Mr. Booker had to leave at 9 o'clock. So he will get the transcripts and read those, assuming nobody has any objection to that, correct? Any of the parties? Okay, thank you.
No objection.
No objection, yeah.
All right.
John, what is your profession?
I'm an architect.
And are you registered in the state of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
And have we marked as A10 and handed up your CV curriculum vitae on this matter?
Yes.
Did you compile a developmental impact statement that was handed up as one of the exhibits here? I believe it was Exhibit A1C.
Yes, I did.
And did you prepare certain areas, or then you just compile certain areas?
There are certain portions that I was the primary author of. Other parts were done in conjunction with the university or other consultants, and other parts were provided to me by the consultants.
Okay, do you know in particular what parts you prepared?
In general, well, how about I run down this way? In general, the environmental and natural resources was compiled by the civil engineer. Housing, demographics, socioeconomics was primarily mine. Business and economic development was a combination of me with Villanova University. Transportation and circulation plan was primarily Frank Tavani with a little bit of input on my end. Open space and recreation was a combination of me and Villanova. Historical and archaeological resources was mine. Community services and facilities was primarily mine. Existing land use and the land use plan was a combination of me with Dave Newell. Impact on sensitive natural features was primarily the civil engineer. Impact on transportation was primarily Frank Tavani. The impact on the school district, on the nearby commercial facilities were both the e-consult, Lee Wong. Public utilities was civil engineer Dave Newell. Police and fire protection was e-consult. Open space and recreational facilities was a combination of me with Villanova. Impact on character surrounding neighborhoods was primarily mine, and financial fiscal impact analysis overview was primarily e-consult. But specific questions would have had different input from different people.
Okay, now also the CICD, I don't believe, requires a review of the institutional portion of the comprehensive plan. Is that right?
That is correct.
But a review letter by one of the township staff requested that you do that.
Correct.
Correct. And did you do such a review?
I did.
And what did your review indicate?
What I did was similar to the methodology I used for other portions of the comprehensive plan. I looked at the recommended actions section of that particular section, which I believe was section 8. Looked at the recommended actions and sort of prepared a brief response to each of them.
Okay, and what was your response to that?
Okay, the first recommended action was that, as stated in the 1988 plan, limit expansion of institutional uses to areas within the present limits of campus areas, which are zoned as institutional districts.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So you want
Sorry,
to
when I'm
repeat
reading.
that? Norm, are
Yes,
you okay?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I could paraphrase that section also. Okay, so for the first recommended action, the response is that the area within the CICD boundary is within the present limits of the Villanova campus and is within the planned institutional district.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but John, what are you responding to? What?
Ritu, in their letter dated August 19th, asked that he do an analysis.
Who did?
Ritu.
Oh, okay.
Steve Gabriel.
Okay.
Well, can we Yeah, I'm a
Is
little...
that the T2 letter, August 19th letter?
Yes.
Exhibit T2?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
He asked in his T2 letter that we do an analysis of the comprehensive plan's institutional section and whether the impact of the CICD on that. And that's what John's going through right now.
So that's on page 4 of the Ratu letter. There was a discussion there. Comprehensive plan consistency review, institutional use. That's what the testimony is directed at?
That's correct. And as Ratu states, it's not required as part of the developmental impact statement, but he asked for us to do an analysis on it.
Okay.
So I guess to paraphrase what the recommended actions from that section of the comprehensive plan are, was that, is that the expansions of institutional uses be limited within the present limits of campus areas, which is zoned as institutional districts, which is what is being done in the case of the CICD development. Another recommended action is that there be a long-range land use plan that be presented by the institution and be updated every 2 years. And while I'm not involved with that, my understanding is that Villanova has maintained a land use plan and updated it periodically, and that they're currently working on an update as well. The next recommended action in the township's comprehensive plan is that the zoning ordinance for institutional districts be modified so that if the institutional use ceases, the area could be rezoned for residential use. I do not feel that is directly applicable to this project. The next recommended action is that refine as necessary the existing zoning ordinance for institutional districts so that different setback requirements for the various uses allowed within institutional districts are provided. And those which are less compatible with adjacent zoning districts be set back farther than more compatible uses. And this development has very strongly considered the issue of setbacks from the adjacent zoning. These were addressed as part of the ordinance, and we are in compliance with the ordinance. And actually, relation to residential properties, our setbacks exceed the values required by ordinance. Another recommended action is that Radnor Township staff hold an annual planning information exchange with the institutions. That's something that would be initiated by the township, and so Villanova is not directly responsible for that or applicable, but Villanova would expect would be willing to participate, although I guess I cannot speak for them in that regard. And then the last recommended action is that the township publish a periodic newsletter which could reserve space for institutional notes, and that would be a township action as well.
Okay, now, as to the developmental impact statement itself, did that include an analysis of the consistency of the proposed conditional use plan with the township's comprehensive plan?
Yes.
And that's what this whole
That's what the document basically is.
document is. And as it relates to your portion of the document, is everything true and correct to your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. At the time it was written, that was the case. I know that there have been one or two items that have been brought up during the course of this hearing where some inconsistencies have been noted.
Okay. And does it contain an accurate representation of the developmental plan in regards to the comp plan?
Yes.
Does the developmental impact statement meet the requirements of the CICD?
Yes.
Is it an improvement over existing conditions? And if it is, in what areas?
I believe it is an improvement over the existing conditions, and some of the ways would be aesthetics. Because as has been previously testified, we're adding buildings and landscape, which is consistent in character with other portions of the Villanova campus and represent a significant improvement over the surface parking lot. We are, as previously testified by the landscape architect, buffering is also going to be improved along the high-speed line tracks and along the east side of the development is being improved over the existing stormwater conditions, We will be improving the stormwater management system to, at minimum, a level which is consistent with the township code. Traffic, as previously testified by the traffic engineer, will be improved in several areas, for example, with additional turn lanes and a pedestrian bridge over Lancaster Avenue. And in regard to the setbacks to residences, we are exceeding the values that are outlined in the code.
Right now, also, as part of the developmental impact statement, was a phasing plan prepared?
Yes, there was.
And could you describe the phasing plan, and is that an ongoing process, the phasing of the development?
Yes, it was provided as Exhibit E of the development impact statement itself. I guess I'm not there to drive the visuals here. It's at the very end. It was showing 4 phases. Keeping in mind this was created in May of this year. And since that time, it's been subject to further discussions, both internally with the construction manager, talking about what would make the most sense. The project will be phased. The exact order of the phases has not been settled on, and I can't say that what is shown in here would be the exact order that the project would occur.
Okay. And just so the board knows, Villanova may be considering mounting the mechanicals on the buildings, and the CICD requires if they do that, they have to get approval from the board during the conditional use process. And we may recall Mr. Kluver at some point later on if that's the decision on the way that they're going to proceed with mechanicals. Okay, and that's all I would have at this point.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Royce. Just because you mentioned it last, with regard to the, by the way, John, I have to thank you for the great job you've been doing during this hearing on finding the right exhibits. I don't know how you do it, but you've been doing a great job.
Well, I was the person who compiled it, so.
But you last mentioned the phasing, and you said that the phasing that's represented in Exhibit E may not be the phasing. But it does make sense, does it not, to construct the West Lancaster parking lot and the parking garage before you lose the parking spaces on the 2 surface lots?
I think that one of there's several key concepts with the phasing of the project. And the maintenance of a parking count is first and foremost in that. So I think whatever order they go in, that would be one of the key priorities. Whether it's doing the expansion of some of the other campus lots first, before the surface lot is done, or simultaneous. But yes, maintaining parking is a key component.
All right, great. And I'm going to just briefly go through the development impact statement that you've submitted, which is Exhibit A1C. I'm sorry. I'm going to go through the development impact study, which is Exhibit A1C, and compare it in some places to the RETTW, R-E-T-T-W, planning letter from Steve Gabriel that's received into evidence as T2. I'm going to ask that do you have your development impact study in front of you?
I do.
Okay. Would you first turn to page 3? And I'm just going to ask you some questions I think I asked of your landscape witness early on. And I'll remind you that this is a comparison to the comprehensive plan requirements, correct? Your
Correct.
report?
This is in response to the township's comprehensive plan.
Right. So you're aware, are you not, that the comprehensive plan at section 2-40 recommends the preservation of existing natural areas to the maximum extent possible. Is that correct?
That is my recollection.
All right. So the restrictive covenant area of the Aldwin Triangle is not, you would agree, maintaining and preserving that entire natural area. Is that also correct?
There are certain portions of that area that would not be specifically preserved under that.
All right. And at one of the hearings, I'm going to say maybe the first one, I asked whether the witness had any information as to whether Villanova might consider preserving the entire Aldwin Triangle. Do you have any information? Have you been updated since that first hearing?
I have not been part of those conversations. That would be a question best asked of Villanova or some other representative, I would anticipate.
All right, good. I'm hoping that there's going to be a representative of Villanova that will testify in this hearing. That area of the Aldwin Triangle, however, that is not currently listed to be preserved, could serve, could it not, sir, as an area for some additional buffering materials?
I believe additional plantings could be put in that area.
Right. And we agree that plantings are not necessarily, will not reduce noise, but they certainly will have a visual impact and a psychological impact. Would you agree?
And plantings can always change visual views and other impacts. There are portions of that site that are dense with foliage and others that are more open.
Very good. Further down, and this is just for explanation to me, and perhaps some members of the commission may not understand it. In number 6 on that same page, you indicate that you're going to apply for LEED certification. What does that mean?
LEED is an accreditation created by the United States Green Building Council. It is a way of monitoring or, I guess, proving a certain amount of sustainable design to a project, looking at areas such as good practices in site development, water management, energy use, and other considerations such as that.
So that it would be the goal, I would presume, of the plan to accomplish the preservation of as much natural resources as possible, to reduce light pollution, to reduce noise pollution, et cetera, correct?
Well, I don't know specifically about the preservation of natural resources towards those goals.
Right.
One of the goals of LEED is to understand the sort of the holistic impact of a development. So you sometimes will do one course of action over another because you feel it'll have more benefit. As an example of that, not specific to this project, but you read in the paper recently about a large solar farm being proposed for, I think it's the Coatesville School District, but that would come with the loss of trees. So, you have to recognize that there are sometimes competing interests with a similar goal of sustainability.
Okay. And just in general, the questions I'm going to be asking you tonight about your report, although you don't know the questions, you would agree that the areas are still ripe for improvement and discussion during land development if the conditional use is approved by this body, correct?
I think that land development will see definitely some evolution in design.
Is it within your purview in this report to consider the impact of the development upon the neighborhood and its streets?
I think that I could speak to general character of neighborhoods.
Good.
Not specifically to streets or traffic or anything along those lines.
There has been, has there not, sir, discussion about the potential for some traffic calming improvements or devices to be employed in the neighborhoods around the development?
I've heard some discussions about that.
What would be, in your opinion, traffic calming improvements around the development in the neighborhoods?
Well, as I mentioned before, the traffic portion of neighborhood development is probably not something I'm the best person to speak to. I mean, that's more of a traffic engineer kind of consideration.
All right, so traffic calming would not be part of your purview?
No.
Okay.
I could always give an opinion as just a person, but not as an expert in that.
And I don't want you to do that.
Have you, sir, participated in the meetings with neighbors and township staff?
I've participated in a fair number. I don't know that I've been to all of them, though.
Okay. And you do know there's been a number of concerns that I'll assume you will state will be considered by yourself and the applicant in connection with this, and let me go over some of those. there should be some consideration given, and I believe you've mentioned to the buffering plan that is thus far submitted. Is it the intent, or is it the hope of the university that the buffering that will be done will eliminate as many of the impacts upon the residential neighbors that will inevitably occur by the development, sight, sound, et cetera?
I mean, the goal of the buffering is to mitigate impact on the development. There are considerations of sight, sound, and I guess those are the two primary ones. To say we will eliminate them, I don't think anyone can make those kinds of guarantees, however.
Okay, but you'll make your efforts to do so. I didn't mean you could eliminate them in its entirety. Okay.
No, but we're considering them. We've had discussions about plantings. We've had conversations about noise and other things that have impact on the neighbors.
All right, and you're going to maintain as much existing vegetation as possible in the West Lancaster area, is that correct?
That is correct, and we have the parking layout that was shown on an updated form that I think pushed back further from that boundary line so we could maintain a buffer area. Within that area, the landscape architect who testified previously had noted that there were certain larger trees that we were making efforts to retain.
Good, and you're going to make efforts during land development, I will assume, to maximize the height and density of mandatory landscape buffers. Am I correct?
I believe that was discussed already with the landscape architect, but it's my understanding that buffering will be done to a level that is appropriate and effective.
Right. An examination of the orientation of the buildings of the dormitory buildings indicates that most of them are oriented with common areas away from the residential sections, with the exception of dormitory building 1A. Would you agree?
I believe 1A and 1C also have two small courtyard areas that are oriented to the south.
Is there any possibility of reorienting those common areas away from the residential section in connection with this development?
Reorienting those would it would reduce the amount of frontage along Lancaster Avenue. It could potentially impact the number of students. This was a layout that made sense from the architectural perspective. I know that the other architect who testified, Kevin Smith, was the one who generated this layout, so he would know better than I what options were considered and what options would make the most sense.
All right, how about noise? Is that within your purview?
We have an acoustician involved in the project. I helped to coordinate their efforts, so in that sense, yes.
Presently, is it contemplated that the windows in the dormitories will be inoperable and that the building would be climate controlled? The buildings would be climate controlled.
Buildings will be climate controlled. The windows will be operable.
Will be operable?
They will be operable. We have a certain amount of fresh air requirements that would be coming from the windows.
Are the windows operable in the dorms that were most recently constructed by Villanova?
I do not know. Okay. I'm being told that the windows in the West Campus are operable.
Okay.
And Mr. Bull, if I could revisit that one question about orienting all the courtyards to the Lancaster Avenue side, I would add one item that by doing these courtyards in the pattern that we have now, it's one way of breaking down the mass of the building, and that if we oriented all the courtyards to the Lancaster Avenue side, you would have a much longer apparent building length along that south side.
So your testimony is the site impacts would be negatively, or the site views would be negatively impacted?
My opinion is that the configuration we have here is better than if all the courtyards were on the north side.
Okay. I think Mr. Cornelia mentioned just now that, or just prior to my starting questioning, that there was going to be some discussion of mechanicals?
Correct.
Where are they presently contemplated to be?
We should probably get the site plan up. You can give me 30 seconds. Looking at this site plan, if you see the corner that is just above the pointer.
You can testify from there.
Okay.
Good.
So in this area right here, we have a box indicating location of potential cooling towers to serve the unit, all the housing units. These are units that would be roughly 20 feet in one dimension, 40 feet in another dimension, and
Okay,
have a height component.
So they're at ground level?
They're at ground level.
Will they be contained? Will there be enclosures, noise buffering enclosures, or?
They would be enclosed and buffered.
Great.
But what we are looking at now is the potential of putting them into a concealed area on the roof of the development. We're also looking at putting some generators serving the property, or the buildings on the roof, as well as some freestanding condensing units to serve some of the IT rooms.
If they're on the roof, is the noise better or worse than at ground level with enclosures?
Well, if they're on the roof, we would be putting them in such a way that they are also shielded and/or enclosed. So in many ways, being on the roof could be an improvement in the noise level, because the distance away is greater, the noise would be directed up. So it would be very much out of a direct line of hearing.
All right. Then if you would direct your attention to the parking garage structure itself, and again, I'm on noise. Is there a way to reconfigure or redesign the residential neighborhood facing walls so as to lessen the sound that would emanate from the parking garage? In other words, could you make the wall less open than is proposed?
There's a high percentage of openness that's required for a parking structure for proper ventilation. I don't know the exact percentage of openness that is currently being proposed relative to that amount, but it's the amount that's required, if I recall.
So there's a
correctly,
requirement,
50%.
and I'm sorry to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
So it's roughly in the area of 50% is my recollection that's required for openness.
All right, is there, could you maybe for the next hearing give us some indication of where it might state that, that requirement?
It would be in the building codes.
Okay. And is it correct to, well, will the applicant developer make every effort to maximize the area of the wall consistent with that requirement so that there is as little sound as possible emanating out of there?
I don't know that sound is the only consideration in terms of the degree of openness. We also have aesthetic issues. We want to make sure that this garage is an attractive element, and openings can help with that piece. Openings also help break down the visible mass of the garage as well. So I would not want to commit to that for fear of having some other unintended consequences.
All right, is it something, though, that can continue to be looked at, again, going forward?
Yes.
Very good. Would you agree to continue to have meetings with neighbors and township staff regarding issues and concerns during development?
Well, all of the meetings have been scheduled through Villanova in the past, and I'm always willing to attend them, and I like to think that Villanova would be willing to continue having them as well, but that is their choice.
Right. Is there any noise monitoring being conducted now or being proposed in connection with this development?
We did ask our acoustician to do some sound level monitoring. This was performed 2 weekends ago over the course of several days, and actually it's during the week and into the weekend. The monitoring has been completed. The acoustician is due to get a summary report to me after he's had a chance to review the data, but I have not yet received it.
All right, and that will be submitted as part of this hearing?
We'll see what it has to say, and if it's in a format that we feel could be submitted, but we intend to share some information along those lines, be it in this format or with individual meetings or separate meetings with the neighbors in Township.
Okay. On page 26 of your report, and I'm just trying to clarify this, the statement says that the project will include 20 to 25,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space. Do we know exactly at this point what the proposed area of retail space will be?
No, this is an item that is still being developed by the university. So we
Right.
do not have it in a specific number at this time.
So that number won't be clarified till we get final plans at Lind Development.
That is correct. Or that is my expectation, I should say.
Is the stormwater management system within your purview, sir?
No, it is not. That would be the civil engineer.
We're going to reintroduce him at some point.
Good. We'll have just a few questions, and we'll have our own witness on that. Thank you, Mr. Kluver. That's all I had.
Just perhaps on the mechanicals, but not on this particular, what he testified on this evening.
I'm sorry. Does any of the parties have any questions of this witness? Any of the board members have any questions? Okay. So seeing that, it's 9:30. I think you don't have any other witnesses tonight? Okay. So the hearing then will be continued to the 30th, September 30th is our next night. That's a Tuesday, the end of the month. And at that time, Mr. Cornelia, who do we expect?
There will be cross by Mr. Bola of our traffic people.
Right.
And then I will notify you and Mr. Bola as to who we will have backed up in reserve.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from any of the parties before we adjourn? Okay. So with that, we'll close the hearing.